5th annual Vibrant Living Expo, I think. My name is Don Weaver. I've been asked to give a talk on my first 32 years on a 100% raw vegan diet. And I've been asking myself how that can be helpful to anyone who's in the audience, and I hope you'll keep in mind any questions you want to ask me if I don't cover something in my informal talk here, but I'll share my experience and hope it will be of some benefit to you and your dietary and health and life path and adventures. Welcome. I'm speaking on my first 32 years on a 100% raw vegan diet. So that means back about April 1977, I decided to try a 100% raw vegan diet. I guess I'll go back, tell you a little bit of history, which is, sure. Oh, mic needs adjustment. I grew up in more or less standard American suburbia down in the San Francisco Peninsula and ate pretty much standard American diet growing up. I believed the TV propaganda on milk being good for a body and animal products being essential, and as an athlete, a dedicated basketball player and baseball player, and played with other sports and athletics, I naturally wanted to eat the right foods, so I was looking for what those were, and I watched a lot of TV at the time, and there were all the ads for the junk foods and the fast foods and the dairy and the animal products. So up until age 18, I put plenty of those in my body, and I'm sure as a consequence I was sick at home quite a bit growing up from a young age. I had just about every common childhood disease, all of which are unnecessary, but most people think they're inevitable. Plus I also had things like mononucleosis and walking pneumonia, kept me out of school for like a month to 2 months at times growing up. So at some point I started thinking a little harder about causes and effects and what might produce health and what produces ill health, and it really wasn't until I went to UC Berkeley on a basketball scholarship at age 18 that I started thinking, well, I better start studying the health and nutrition a little more seriously if I want to be the best athlete I can and the healthiest person. And I didn't really realize at that point the whole ecological implications of dietary choices, and I didn't really realize the health of the planet was deteriorating rapidly at the time, back in the 70s, and people were first starting to write books on the topic, which I began to read. But one thing that really struck me walking around the UC Berkeley campus was my 30,000 fellow students were, for the most part, looking both very unhealthy and very unhappy, depressed, and I thought, school's kind of depressing at times, but this is unusual that people would seem to be this ill, and these people are only 18 to 22 years old for the most part. So what's going on here? So that really put a light bulb on in my head to start really questioning why most people would be so unhealthy and unhappy. And naturally, I didn't want to join the herd and just walk along depressed and unhealthy as a young person, and presumably through life if you want to continue the trend, which I didn't. So I began studying health and nutrition more intently, and I stumbled upon some really radical health books, like by Viktoras Kulvinskas, our friend who's here speaking also. His Survival into the 21st Century really woke me up to a lot of both personal health and ecological health realities. And I read Professor Arnold Ehret's famous books from the early 1900s, The Mucosalous Diet Healing System and Rational Fasting. And these books really woke me up to the possibility that we can live, lightly on the earth and eat lightly, and fasting could actually, help build health, clean out all the old garbage that I'd been putting in for 19 years, and so I started experimenting with fasting, did a 3-day fast in my little studio apartment in Berkeley, and I was starting to feel amazingly, lighter and healthier and clearer mentally. I started walking around Berkeley and around the campus, and my whole perception was changing. Things were looking more alive and beautiful, and I was seeing other people not just as some other stranger there, but a fellow traveler on the path of life, and someone with a soul. And I just saw people in a different light, and it started to open up my heart a lot. To my capacity for compassion really started to wake up at that time. And I started just spontaneously becoming, less selfish and just more concerned with life on the planet and where we were all going together. And this coinciding with my studies of ecology and agriculture, I wanted to study how everything connected to everything else, which is really what ecology is all about, all the interrelationships of life to our environment. That's what ecology is. And I began studying Dr. Herbert Shelton's books on natural hygiene, which is really the study of ecology as it applies to human beings. What is our best relationship to, sunlight and the air and fresh air, and to water and food and the soil and the earth as a whole, and to other people. So I began studying natural hygiene, which also emphasizes fresh raw foods as the optimal diet for humanity, but also puts it in the context of all the factors that go into healthy living. Natural hygiene has been called the art and science of health by healthful living. So many people are searching for health, of course, in drugs, which is impossible to find, and other people buy, this or that supplement or this or that particular food or lifestyle practice. But to me, it made sense, the art of healthful living as a whole, trying to have a healthful relationship with everything and everyone, made the most sense to me. So I studied natural hygiene in depth and tried to incorporate all the principles of fasting when sick or not really hungry, or occasionally to just clean out old garbage, and eating fresh raw foods and trying to combine them compatibly, so you're not piling all different types of foods on each other and hoping they'll all digest efficiently, but rather going towards more mono meals and eating like fruit alone and having a salad by itself, and eating moderately of nuts and seeds, but not eating them in large amounts and not combining them where they'll have trouble digesting, and then not doing too many concoctions. And gourmet things don't work so well for me because they're usually harder to digest, and I like to feel really healthy and clear and light. And I tried some of the desserts last night, which were beautifully made and made with a lot of love, but they're, for me, hard to digest. There's so many combinations and heaviness. So this was at the private reception for speakers. So it sort of felt like I had a rock in my stomach for a while compared to what I'm used to with all the fruits and the salads. And I finally took a few mile hike up the hill and breathed deeply, and I got the digestion going. But I think I'm just really sensitive to foods that are combined well, so they digest quickly and efficiently. And obviously the purpose of food is to digest and assimilate what's in the food, all the good qualities, and if there's anything useless, to eliminate it efficiently. And if you do that on a consistent basis, I think it produces really good level of health, and digestive tract all healthy, and the bloodstream, well nourished, and the brain clear generally, and emotional realm steady and strong. And that's been my experience, just eating raw foods within the context of getting plenty of exercise and enough sunshine to produce vitamin D and all the good things it does for your skin and hormones, and trying to get plenty of rest and sleep, though I'm often up too late. That's sort of my main weakness as far as not getting enough rest and sleep, because I have my work in trying to save our local planet from ecological destruction keeps me up way after midnight quite often, just trying to catch up on email and do writing and study and research. So I recommend people be well rested, take a nap if you get a chance during the day. That can make a big difference. And try to sleep whatever you need, 6 to 8 hours or whatever. I don't always get as much as 6, but I try to. Some of the things that have been tremendously important to me, I made a few notes. Well, first, why was I inspired to try a raw vegan diet? Well, for me, initially it was kind of a selfish thing. I want to be the best athlete I can. I was sort of thinking go on a pro basketball track and be a pro basketball player, because I love the game tremendously. I wasn't trying to get a big contract or something. I just wanted to keep playing. But probably fortunately, I started spraining my ankle, having a few injuries, and having to sit out, and sort of fell behind in the course of the track to the NBA. So I began studying more intently, what can I do to make a contribution off the court and, in life, in my future. And again, these studies of ecology and health just, made me realize I'm part of a species on this earth that is in a habit of taking from the earth and exploiting nature's gifts and not giving back much, if anything. And of course, poisoning the planet through all the carcinogenic chemicals that we produce and have been spewing into the environment for decades. And of course, then I read books like The Population Bomb by Paul Ehrlich, which pointed out that if population keeps growing and people keep extracting resources from the earth, that eventually, we could leave a more or less barren planet. So at some point, obviously, we have to reverse that trend. And fortunately, in the last 5 years or so, you're seeing a tremendous, greening the earth movement. More and more people are realizing that current civilization is unsustainable and is leading to dramatic climate changes worldwide, which we're seeing more and more, and the loss of forest cover and the sickening and dying and burning of the trees, which has become epidemic in a lot of the world. And the depletion of the soil, of course, is a main area I've focused on in my research and my writing. If any of you heard my other talk about the need to replenish the earth with rock dust minerals and with billions of trees, that's become an emphasis, particularly since I met a man named John Hamaker in the late 70s, actually. I began working with John. He was a real ecological genius that pointed out to us that the soil is greatly depleted over the 10,000 plus years of our current interglacial period, and that we need to replenish it just as nature does by grinding up billions of tons of rocks and returning them to the soil to make the food high quality again. True superfoods, as I talked about yesterday, that if we create a super fertile soil, all our foods will be superfoods instead of having to necessarily, import whatever it is from South America or from the Himalayas or what. We can grow this superfoods in our backyard as well as have them flown over from far countries. So. Can
you explain that a little more? Like, what do you put into the soil?
Sure. Yeah. Basically, and I do have a table with papers for people to read about this, and the website remineralize.org. You can check it out in detail, and the books I authored and co-authored are free online at a website called soilandhealth.org. But briefly, basically, the main constituents of soil, the earth was once a molten rock that cooled down, and this lifeless rock somehow eventually turned into this paradise earth, which we've been depleting, as I mentioned, for centuries. Still, a lot of it is paradise, but we can't go too far in pushing it in the other direction, or the whole system, climatic and ecological, can collapse on us and likely shift back into a new glacial period or otherwise chaotic climatic modes. And so, if we do what nature does in remineralizing soils with rock powders, eventually that molten ball of rock, Earth, was eventually colonized by microbes, and they start the whole process of turning the Earth into paradise by building soil, turning the rock into basically living microbial protoplasm, spreading, and then their bodies dying and becoming the basis of soil, and then all kinds of other eventual green plants growing and sprouting and growing and dropping their leaves, dying back into the soil, growing up and building the soil depth, and eventually enough for trees to take root, and eventually huge forests, tropical and temperate zone forests to spread and create a Garden of Eden on the planet. So we can just do what nature does and reverse this whole degeneration process from people mining the soil, taking all the minerals.
Is there like a special place where you get this?
Many places all around the world, and that remineralize.org website has a resources listing of the companies that are producing and distributing rock powder. Sometimes you can get it for free at local gravel pits or very inexpensively, because they sometimes have byproducts of gravel dust or gravel crusher screenings, they may call it, where they crush and grind rocks down to different sizes, gravels and finer and sand, and sometimes they have mountains of the fine stuff that they don't really have a big market for, but that, to match that with the soil need, it would be the perfect match. I actually gave a talk on this years ago to the National Aggregates Association, the people who own and operate all the gravel pits around the country, and they were very interested in doing this, but so far there hasn't been a good network of linkage between the farmers, most of whom don't yet know about the value of soil remineralization. Strangely enough, it should be obvious that soil is made from rock, and to replenish it fully we need to add back all the rock in a fine dust form. But it's increasingly becoming common sense or widely held knowledge that remineralization is a key to our future and to the future food supply, and not only in quantities, so we won't have worldwide famines, but for quality, so we'll be fully nourished in mind and body. And I think that results in a spirit that is more positive and looking to do constructive things in the world when we're not malnourished and just stuck inside our own health problems and our own consciousness alone. So yeah, the remineralization is another thing that to me has been a great help to my own personal health and other people who've done it, because if you have your own garden and you can eat fresh food every day that's grown in really super soil, you can be eating this super food, super produce on a daily basis year round, and it just, to me, it makes a huge difference. I notice when I'm traveling and away from my garden, eating regular organic produce, it's just not the same thing. You don't feel as well nourished and as vitalized, and it doesn't taste as good. And that was the first thing that really impressed me, both when I first visited John Hamaker back in Michigan, where he lived and had his little farm where he was demonstrating the value of remineralization, just using byproducts from the local gravel pit. I tasted some carrot juice that Anita, John's wife, made for me, and I thought it was a bowl of dark tomato soup. But it was this carrot juice that was super dark and delicious, and like the best thing I ever tasted. It's probably the first real food I'd ever had in my life, like at age 20, I guess, 20 or 21. So that just kind of shocked me into realizing that food could be so much better than we've been growing it and using it. So I would encourage everyone who's moving towards optimal nutrition and optimal health to try to grow at least a small garden, grow some of your own really high quality foods.
I got a garden, so I'm going to definitely attempt it.
Cool, great. Yeah, I encourage everyone, like at least a small area, or even if you're in an apartment, you can you can grow trays of things like buckwheat lettuce and sunflower greens and wheatgrass. If creates the light, enhances the light spectrum.
Improves the food and flowers, etc.
Yeah, that's definitely a theory that's going around, and has he
First I heard about it.
Did he say he's seen convincing evidence that it helps?
Well, he's got a beautiful place.
Yeah, probably does. Well, good. Probably supplies a few minerals too, as the crystals break down and slough off, the fine minerals. The real fine dust is what feeds the microbes, but crystals can have other energetic effects. So let me make sure I've covered what I wanted to say in my notes. I mentioned the gardening and eating mineralized fresh food for those of us who want to strive towards optimal health and nutrition. That's so important. And for those coming in late, I have a table and literature to pass out, and you could always get the DVD later of my talk yesterday where I went into depth on soil and earth regeneration, but I'm happy to talk about it with you here and afterwards. To me, I guess another motivating factor for going raw and vegan was eventually learning about the plight of animals. As I was saying, it was first sort of about me and my health. I wanted to be, a healthy person, good athlete, and so on. But then, gradually, I led into my consciousness the fact that we're not only destroying forests and soils and the climate worldwide through a lot of our neglect and abuse, but also learning about what happens to animals in slaughterhouses and in general. So that eventually cracked open my heart in that respect, and said, well, why don't I try to go vegan and see if I can be healthy? Especially as a gardener, that was a challenge. Can a human being meet all his or her needs from the garden, the original Garden of Eden, the planet Earth, and through a smaller scale garden. So, and of course, eating organic produce in general. So I wanted to find out if that was possible. It seemed like there was no reason it shouldn't be, and why can't we meet all our needs for vitamins, minerals, amino acids, enzymes from the plant world? And I think I've proven it out. At least my first 32 years, I feel super healthy 99% of the time. I'm 54 now, and I feel like I'm still in my 20s, and it's just strange looking at the calendar and seeing how I was born in 1955, and I feel so youthful and great. And so if the earth keeps supporting me and all of us, I think I can go at least another 32 or 50 or more years of 100% raw vegan. I would encourage everyone to get blood tests once in a while to see your status for all the nutrients, and then maybe do one every 5 or 10 years if you have any doubt that you may not be getting everything you need. For me, I did a 30-year raw vegan checkup with my friend Dr. Alan Goldhammer, who runs the True North Health Center in Santa Rosa. Very good place. Their website is healthpromoting.com if anyone wants to see what they're doing. They have a fasting facility for people who want to fast and clean out the old garbage before putting in the residual garbage before putting in the great stuff, or the best stuff you can find or grow. But my blood test showed everything looked great. He couldn't find anything wrong with me, but my B12 seemed to have been low. Actually, I had a first blood test 5 years into raw, and my B12 showed low in that. And it showed about the same low 25 years later after 30 years raw vegan. But he encouraged me, based on his experience with a lot of vegans and raw fooders and other people who get deficient in B12 or get low in it, possibly dangerously low or not up to optimal levels. The website for True North, it's healthpromoting.com. So anyway, my B12 showed low, like maybe around 50 units, possibly less, which is considered very low by most people. I didn't have any of the classic B12 symptoms. You can read a whole list of them if you research it. I read a book called Could It Be B12, and it made a convincing case that millions of people in this country of all dietary persuasions and ages, though particularly as you get older, are deficient in B12 and need B12 from somewhere. It's even been dropping in animal products, which are traditionally, by traditional nutritionists, considered the only source of B12 or only reliable source. But even those have been dropping significantly, according to some studies, and that's probably due to the soil demineralization in the environment, because the animal feeds are also getting lower in minerals year by year. As I mentioned yesterday, there's strong documentation that human foods on average have gone down 20 to 80% or more in mineral content since the early 1900s. So you, in theory, have to eat 5 or 10 times as much of a food to get the same amount of mineral content, if it even has some trace elements. The way chemical agriculture has been mining and neglecting the soil replenishment, that's very possible things have close to zero of some trace elements, and we've got to get all the essential elements. That's why they call them essential. And there's at least 30 plus minerals that have proven to be essential, and they usually find a new one every 5 years that is considered essential or has an important function in optimizing human nutrition, human health.
I'm sorry, I don't remember if essential means you produce it yourself. That it does mean that, right?
No, not necessarily. No, it usually means, well, you need it from some source, some vitamins and minerals. Some vitamins we produce on our own, or vitamin D we produce on our skin through the action of sunlight primarily. But essential means we need them. We need our iron, our molybdenum, our manganese, our calcium, our magnesium. All these things are considered essential. Our vitamin A, our B vitamins, vitamin C. Some animals produce their own vitamin C. Humans supposedly need it from food, and since we're so adapted to eating fruits and vegetables and normally crave them in a state of health, we can get plenty of vitamin C from those. But anyway, I was going to say, I started taking, Dr. Goldhammer recommended I experiment with B12, and I just started taking these pure caps of microbially produced methylcobalamin, which is considered apparently the most assimilable and safest form of B12 supplement. So I started taking those for 6 months, and my B12 went up to from about 50 to 316, which is considered well into a safe zone. And I have felt better overall, like more stamina, that ability to email up till 2 a.m. or more, without being yawning after midnight, that kind of thing. Methylcobalamin? Oh, just like it sounds. METHYLCOBALA.
What's the next word?
Methylcobal, COBALAMIN.
And it's safer than the B12 that you buy like in the foods?
It's a form of B12. You can look on the label. There'll be there's 2 or 3 different kinds common in supplements: methylcobalamin and cyanocobalamin, which actually has traces of cyanide in it and is considered potentially slightly toxic, I guess, especially if you use it regularly or a lot of it. And there's, I think, one other kind of cobalamin, but it's not jumping into my head right now. Do you know it, sir? No.
I was just going to ask you, is the brand name Pure?
The company is Pure Encapsulation, and their website, I think, is purecaps.com. And I think they may only sell through doctors or healthcare practitioners of one kind or another. I've been getting it through Dr. Goldhammer's office at the True North Health Center in Santa Rosa, and also my friends Rick and Karen Dina, the Raw doctors who are here this weekend. They were also selling it, but now they've just moved and they've closed their office. They're doing more on-the-road teaching like here. So they're not currently selling it, I don't think. So right now the only place I know, Northern California, but you could always contact the company if you're somewhere else and need to find out what doctors would carry it, what doctors are natural health care practitioners of whatever kind.
Have you ever tried the B12 that's in the whole booster?
No, I haven't. I've only tried this one kind, which seemed like one thing I like about it is they use the veggie caps, rather than gelatin or something. And so I just twist off the veggie cap anyway. I don't even eat that, and put the B12 into my juice in the morning and just take it that way, real simple. So another question, sir? I think we can just jump into questions and discussion because I've covered most of what, why my motivation. I mentioned, my concern with animals, and for those of you who don't know what humanity's treatment of animals is really, the extent of it and how bad it's become. This DVD called Earthlings is one I saw recently. It's the most comprehensive and honestly gut-wrenching and heart-wrenching movie I've ever seen on this topic. It covers all the different forms of human disrelationship with animals, from slaughterhouses to circuses to rodeos to entertainment industry, the fur industry, and it's just. I think someone says this movie is called The Vegan Maker because it's just so graphic, and secret pictures taken within slaughterhouses and all these other places. The abuse that goes on. I mean, if human beings are going to kill animals for food, it should happen just instantly, in my opinion, and not drawn out torture and this kind of thing. It's just with crazy people, swearing at the animals and kicking them around, and it goes way beyond that. But anyway, for me, that became a big motivation, as well as, seeing the beauty of children and realizing, in 20 years, the planet might be so much more degenerated and polluted and out of balance, and the food may be worse, the human overpopulation, all these problems, that are going together, that we have to meet as a group of problems and solve together. And we can do that, each of us obviously taking individual responsibility for our own health, and just embrace this small planet Earth and see what we can do to help somehow. A big part of it, going raw vegan takes a huge burden off the world, because you're stopping you stop asking those cattle ranchers to grow more cattle for you and slaughter them, and the dairy people to keep these huge uddered animals enslaved for sucking the milk out of them, which is proven to be some of it full of pus and nasty things, and is obviously not a natural human food. All mammals wean themselves at some point. I think we're meant to be weaned by 4 or 5 at the latest, and get on with eating our natural foods of fruits and vegetables and nuts and seeds, and those pretty much can supply all our needs. Some people seem to do well on grains and some people not, but I personally don't. I'm not attracted to grains, raw or sprouted or otherwise, and do really great on the other foods. And also for me, being optimally healthy is being able to find, both living simply and consciously, trying to be part of the solution rather than part of the problem on the planet, and then having some work which I feel like contributes to the potential evolution and awakening of humanity and the regeneration of the earth. That's important for my psychological health and well-being, to feel like I'm making a contribution. I think that's probably an innate human need, to feel like we're contributing to the whole and to our species and to all the earthlings. We're not the only ones on this planet, and it's really, it's funny. It's really the microbes in the soil that kind of run the show on this planet. If they died overnight, the whole planet would be dead in relatively few days or weeks at the most, except for a few tough organisms like cockroaches and so on. But we wouldn't be around too long without the vegetation on the earth. And the climate, of course, would be totally chaotic and unsupportive. So let's see, what time is it? 20 to 11. Maybe we have 5 or 10 minutes or so for questions. If anyone has any or comments or.
I really would like to ask why you don't combine nuts and seeds.
I don't combine nuts and seeds with, say, fruits in general.
But you combine them with each other.
With each other, yeah, to some extent. It's usually the more, if you eat one nut or one type of seed at a time, you usually probably digest that better than eating 2 or 3 or 4 types of nuts and seeds, because they all need a little bit different digestive process, digestive concentrations of juices and things. But generally they're compatible, like you eat almonds and walnuts together or something. But if you start adding too many or certainly too much, we all have our digestive limits, and we all have to understand our own bodies and what's best for us. So, it's even questionable whether I can be of any benefit for you. I'm on my own unique experience, but we basically have the same bodies, so I think we can learn from each other and our experiences. I don't think it's too much to suggest don't overeat, whatever your digestive capacity is. And I do it occasionally, and I say, oh, I overate, and I wake up the next morning and feel sluggish, and that wasn't worth it. Be a little more careful next time. But yeah, nuts and seeds generally seem to combine best for me, and other people have suggested this with, say, a green vegetable salad, not sort of non-starchy vegetables. If I were to eat like kind of semi-starchy sweet corn and then have a bunch of nuts, for me that would be hard to digest. Better to eat like the sweet corn as a meal by itself, let that digest, and then when you're hungry again, then think, what else do I really need? And usually, like other animals, we have certain instincts for our natural foods, and if we wait till we're truly hungry, which maybe few of us actually experience true hunger, because that kind of comes after getting the old junk out of your body and the cooked food molecules that circulate and the excess fat and salt and sugar and spices that tend to stimulate cravings for more of the same. Which is why when I did some fasting up to 10 and 14 days just on water to basically separate myself from my own personal addictions or cravings for all these stimulating foods, excessively stimulating, so I could really refine my taste capacities, my taste buds, to really appreciate the simpler flavors, but really wonderful and complex flavors when they're well-grown organic fruits and vegetables. So, yeah. So, another follow-up question, then we'll go to... Okay, go ahead. We'll take turns. You next.
Oh, me next? Okay.
Doris, yes.
With that being said about food combinations, now I'm curious whether you eat vegetables and fruits at the same meal.
Not usually. No, that's another thing that doesn't seem to combine so well. Maybe a little bit. Some people, when they're eating real sweet fruit, feel they do better like eating some lettuce or celery with the sweet fruit to sort of add some extra minerals and dilute the sugar.
Enzymes to digest fruits and vegetables, so you're supposedly supposed to do that eat them at different meals.
Yeah, for me that works best. You can experiment and see, but often if you eat a lot of fruit and a lot of vegetables together, you'll get some gas and fermentation, and you may have some problems with that. So for me, because fruit digests the fastest, in general, it wants to go through quickly, and the body assimilates real quickly, and it's largely water, and it'll all go through. And then after your fruit's digested, and I usually have fruit, earlier in the day, I tend to have juice in the morning, fruit through the day as I'm hungry, and then have a big salad at night. But yeah, you can experiment and see what works for you, but I think that's true. There's some digestive incompatibility between a lot of vegetables and fruits. Certainly like if you ate, corn again as an example with peaches, I think you'd have some noise and gas and things coming from below, down below.
So did you say you have just juicing?
Oh, go ahead. We'll get to everybody.
Is juicing breakfast, vegetable juicing?
Breakfast for me tends to be fruits juice, like I usually, because they're always available year-round, I tend to have oranges and apples. I tend to juice those together and drink that. For nutrient insurance, since I'm not growing all my own food in my own relatively small-scale gardens and orchard, I use some just barley and green kamut green powders. Those are fairly inexpensive and good quality, juice grass juice powders that are low temperature dried, so they're considered raw and organic, and those seem to be good nutrient insurance. So when I have juice and green powders in the morning, I can pretty much go till afternoon easily without thinking about food, without a true hunger arising. And then when I get hungry, I usually try to keep a variety of wonderful organic ripe fruits around from markets or from my own trees occasionally, increasingly, because they're growing every year. So next question.
Oh yeah, you were saying that you take the B12, and I'm wondering over the years, have you taken other supplements or vitamins or?
No, just these green powders as nutrient insurance. Occasionally like blue-green algae in the past. I used to trade books to the president of the Celtec company years ago and use the blue-green algae. To me, that's similar to the green powders, with as far as the nutrient spectrum for the most part.
But you're not doing the blue-green algae now?
No, I'm not now. No, except maybe just occasionally. Or I've tried the Vita Mineral Green one, which seems to be pretty tasty and has tons of different organic raw products, and I think that might have some blue-green algae as one of its products. I think it adds the just barley and or the green kamut, as I recall. So, but I think I wouldn't suggest trusting entirely organically grown foods to supply all your needs. Which is why I encourage your own home gardens, because many organic farmers, relatively few, are really enthusiastically remineralizing. There's Cal Organic, the biggest organic grower now in the state and maybe the country, has gotten inspired to use rock dust. They've added 3,000 tons of it to their farms so far, and I think their produce is tasting better. And they started with 20% of their organic acreage, trying out the rock dust, and they like the results enough, so they are now adding it to 100% of their organic acreage. So more and more farmers are starting to do it, and that's a great model. If the largest farm can do it, any scale can do it. So people are doing it on a small scale, large scale. Now there's a lot of farmers in between who need to, I think, give it a try and see for themselves whether it makes sense, whether they get increased quality and quantity, and generally they do. Bob Kennard's another semi-famous organic farmer who supplies all the organic produce, or at least a lot of it, to Chez Panisse restaurant in Berkeley, Alice Waters' place. And he's been using rock dust for 15, 20 years, and his produce is considered, really top-notch. So is Rick and Christy Knowles' produce out in Brentwood, down in the Bay Area. They grow organic fruits and veggies, and they've been using rock dust. Their soil is like super rich. And my friend Stefan Reeve in Maui has a 11-acre farm called Fruition. He's got about 450 fruit trees. He's been remineralizing, and he's got tremendous produce and great healthy trees. And just about everywhere it's tried, people are very, very pleased with the results. So, other questions? I think you're next. Let's try to go in some order. I'm sorry, I'm not sure if I have the order, but
I've just gotten introduced to raw foods and food combining, and it's driving me crazy. I'm trying to figure out what to eat, what not to eat, how to balance it out. You were mentioning, what do you put on a salad? What kind of a dressing? I mean, I used to use like lemon oil, or lemon juice, raw lemon juice, and olive oil or flaxseed oil.
Yeah.
And now I'm finding out you're not supposed to mix fruits with vegetables. So would you not use lemon juice? And what do you use on
well,
this?
juices are a little different than putting in whole lemons or whole fruits. A little lemon juice, I don't think I've heard anyone saying that will spoil the digestion of a salad. I typically use like a little orange juice or lemon juice, and avocado when it's available, or rarely use any kind of separated oils. Once in a while I use a little flaxseed oil or hemp seed oil, just because it's supposed to have oils that are not in good balance or deficient maybe in most foods. But I tend to use avocado or nuts or seeds, either whole or blended, maybe tahini butter, the raw sesame butter, raw hulled sesame butter, or maybe some almond butter or something else. But usually either avocado and things like tomato, I either slice them up whole or sometimes blend them. You can make a nice blended dressing. You can put in a little of whatever you like for flavor, maybe some dulse seaweed or kelp if you like a little saltiness to your dressing. Of course, some people use onions and garlic or things. I don't use much of those because they're not really optimal, in my experience, for digestion. And a follow-up? Yes?
Yeah, and so on the food combining, on the chart that I have, I got off the internet, it also shows you shouldn't combine oils with proteins. So does that mean that you shouldn't eat a protein when you eat a salad if there's oil in the salad?
I would think it would be harder if you add like significant amount of, say, olive oil and then add a lot of nuts to your salad. That might be hard. It would certainly be harder to digest than just one or the other. So like if you're using a spoonful or two of oil and throw a few nuts, you might digest that fine. I tend to avoid that myself. If I do have oil in my salad, I tend not to put tahini butter or dressing or nuts or seeds in there. But so it's pretty much the simpler the better in general for the digestion. But you don't want to feel like you're depriving yourself of real tasty nourishment. So you have to find a balance. What can you digest? I try starting with like small salads, small amounts of dressing, and see if that's satisfying. Sometimes I'll even like make this big salad, and then later I say, why did I make such a big salad? I love salad, but I don't need to get that full of it.
So you would not eat a protein when you would have a salad if there's oil on it?
If there's oil, if it was more than a little bit, I would tend to avoid it. I might not 100% all the time. If I felt like I could digest it, if I was really hungry, if I'd had a hard work day, really working hard and felt like I needed a little more food to replenish, I might have a few mix. But if you have the nut or seed butter, then you don't really need the oil in addition to that. So I'd probably tend to do one or the other, but you can experiment both ways, see what works for your body. And yes, we may have a couple more minutes. Sorry.
The almond butters that you buy, do they soak those almonds? And does that make it harder to digest,
I don't know. I've never heard that they soak almonds before they make almond butter.
Is that the best way to do it, to release the inhibitors and all that? So it wouldn't
probably is.
Really be hard to digest,
It might, it might be harder to digest. I would think so. Like when I usually soak my almonds before I eat them, and I don't usually buy almond butter because it's become so expensive. You can make it yourself. I guess you could soak almonds and make it yourself at home with a Champion juicer or some comparable machine.
Because usually when I make it, it turns white, and then usually the stuff that you buy is like a brown, like they almost roasted butter,
It would go off.
Yeah.
We can hope they don't roast it if it says raw on the label. So we have maybe a couple more minutes. I don't know the timing, but...
What kind of seeds do you use for when you make...
5 minutes, 2 minutes?
When you make like, when you make sprouts, where do you send for your seeds? Or you evidently get yours from...
I used to order a lot from Jaffe Brothers, mail order in Southern California, down in Valley Center, but I usually can find them fairly inexpensively at Bay Area natural food stores like Rainbow Grocery in San Francisco, which has 20% off coupons you can get in the back of the San Francisco phone book, or else I get them from other local natural food stores. So I think we have to wrap up for now. No time for more questions, right? Okay, well, thanks everyone for coming. I'm happy to talk more anytime outside, and hope all your questions get answered by me or someone if you have more questions. So we'll talk more outside. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you. You're welcome. My privilege.